Hello and welcome to the Common Sense SEO show for January 2020. I'm not sure whether this is the only one for January 2020, but at least we're doing one in January 2020. So welcome to a new year. I'm Tony Grant, and over there in Denmark at the helm is Henrik. So hello, Henrik.
Hello there, Tony. And welcome to the first show here in the new decade, 2020. Let's do some housekeeping first. So can everybody see our screen, and can everybody hear us loud and clearly? So if I could get a yes in the comment, we'll appreciate that. Anybody? There's a lag here because we are streaming to both Facebook, and we are streaming to YouTube at the same time. So let's see what's happened here.
That must cause a real...
Everybody say yes. So thank you, guys.
Excellent.
And don't remember to subscribe to our channel so you get notification if we send another one in this decade.
Yeah. And okay, so, and when Henrik said don't remember, he actually meant don't forget. Don't forget to subscribe too. Yeah.
Oh, no. Whatever. So let's get on with it, and let's take a look at today's little program here. So I'll just have to share my screen. So please bear with me for a second.
So today, while Henrik is preparing his research and notes and everything, we're going to be talking about schema. I know we've talked about it before in the past, but we still sort of get feedback along the way. There's still confusion over it. And in the light of the recent release that Patrick did from Ranking Factory just a few weeks ago of Mike Martin's schema plugin, there's been a lot more interest. A lot more people are engaging with schema but maybe for the first time. And we just thought that what we're trying to do is cover some of the gaps in that understanding and bring some of the concept, just some clarity around the concept of schema in general. So thank you, Henrik.
Yeah, I just have to see how I have two screens. I can't share the other screens. How do I do that? Just a second. Okay, let's go there. So now you can see my screen with this basic schema and automation. So that will be the topic for today. So let's go over here and see if we can look at the agenda. So what we're going to talk about is the basic Json-LD syntax and concepts, because there's a lot of confusion in that respect. And we'll also talk about the schema.org concepts. We will look at specifically what we call context, type declarations, and something called IRIs, add type, add ID, and how you put your schema into the web pages and how you automate schema via plugins. So that's the agenda. So why should we use schema? When you and I are looking at a page on a web, we normally can detect what's the page is about. But if we get a text like what's shown on the screen now, will see that it's difficult for us to read. But if we add some paragraph, headings, etc., then we have a possibility of reasonably easy detect what this text is about. When we talk about a web page, then, can we get this loading? Yeah. Then we'll use what we call H1, H2, H3, etc. to provide structure in the HTML document. And that also helps the search engines to try to figure out what the page is about. But if we're talking about the actual bots, then we have to feed those bots so they understand what the page is about, and we want to disambiguate the page. So when the bot comes, we want to be clear in terms of what we mean in different definitions. So we do that by adding schema to the page. Schema is normally added at the top of the page, and it will have some declarations. We'll go deeper into that, and it tells the bot in a structured way, for example, what's here on the screen, that this is a local business. It has address. We have a definition that is a postal address, which we have referred to at the top, that is on schema.org. And then we have all the detail about the business in the schema. So let's go over to see the basic Json-LD syntax. Json-LD, that's JavaScript object notation, linked data it stands for. And the purpose of that is to give context to your document and gives data identifier links to or pointers to other part of the web where we can define the objects that we are talking about. And it also the idea to define the object types that we are dealing with in a page. So we have two types. We have the objects. The object in itself can be a person, place, it could be a thing or an event or whatever. And we have the data types. And the data types normally have a description of our objects. So it will have a type that could be a string, it could be dates, it could be integers. So in that way, we can have a database, you could say, for the actual page, having these types in our schema. So let's try to look at objects. So when we have a page, it's very important that we define the context. So if I'm in an SEO conference and there's a lot of people in the audience, and you and I are chatting and discussing, and then I'll say, well, Tony said so and so and so. And if you look at the context, there's a lot of people in the audience. So my message maybe not be clear to the guy or the woman that I'm talking with. So if I can point at a person there and say, this is Tony, then the other person knows what it's about. And the same applies to the bots when they come into a web page, if we can define the context. So if you look at the code on the screen now, you can see the context in this instance is schema.org /name. And here they actually defined a name called Manuel Borny. And we are also pointing to the schema.org /URL. And we're using what we call an ad ID to point to the website that we're talking about, which is actually http://manual.sporny.org. So the ad ID, that's a keyword that give us an identifier. We call it an RRI. I'll come back to that in a little second. And below you can see as well, there's a reference to schema.org/image. And again, we're using an ad ID and pointing that to a page, an image on our web page. If we go in and look at data types, then again, we define it what contexts we're using it. So here you can see we have something with this called modified, and there is an ad ID again pointing to a public website where the term has been defined. And then we're using that modifier in our own page, and we declare a value, and the value is the time and date at the appropriate time when the page was modified, if that's instance. And again, we put a pointer to the type of time and date, which is referenced on the www.org website for XML schema date time. So by using these pointers, we can disambiguate our pages and create clarity to our web page. And hopefully the bots, being a Google bot or being a Bing bot or whatever, they get the idea what we're trying to tell them. So generally, when we're talking about schema, we're linking to external sources. So here, the person Henrik, he will point to, I might have a profile on Facebook, I might have a profile on LinkedIn, I might have a profile on YouTube, and through LinkedIn, I might have a connection to a guy called Gates, who might be in Wikidata. So we can point to various public sources and actually disambiguate who we are. So they get a clear picture that this guy, Henrik, he's the guy on LinkedIn so-and-so and on Facebook so-and-so. So we are talking about public authoritative databases. One of them is the one called LOD, where there's millions of unique things identified. And if we look at Google, we know they acquired Freebase 13, I think it was. And in Freebase, we have what we call a machine-readable ID for all things that are recorded in that database. And that's normally indicated with a /m/ and then a piece of code. That database is not public anymore. So Google are using new entries in their own database, which is the knowledge panel or the knowledge graph, as they call it. And that's indicated with an ID called /G/ and then a code as well. But as I said before, we can also use, for example, Wikipedia or Wikidata. So if I'm looking for a specific town called Longview down in Texas, they will have an entry in wikidata.org's /wiki, and then and then the identifier for Longview. So if I'm pointing to that RI in a definition of our local schema, then Google will be able to say, okay, we're talking about that Longview in Texas, not in Maryland or wherever there is a Longview city. So does that make sense to the audience? To get an idea of what we are talking about is a dark country. Let's take a look here. This is a question. I can't see, unfortunately, who is asking it, but is there a way to get a free base ID for your entity? No, you cannot get entries in the free base anymore, but you can try to get into other databases like Wikidata. Transbase is a place where you can get a profile and get an ID in. But there's several of them. Next show, we will go into how to create your own custom knowledge panel. And we'll go much deeper into machine readable IDs. We'll go much deeper into the different databases that you can use to hook up. So this is just a basic for the concept, so we understand that. So data linking, we know from our HTML documents that we have the URL we are talking about, and that's a link to an external source from or internal source from our database. So that's a uniform resource locator that locates a resource on the web. So if we go to, for instance, Moz and look at their page, they have a button called Learn More. When we click that, that links to that particular page in the Moz website. But that could be anything. But when we are talking about RRIs, that stands for Internationalized Resource Identifiers, and that's a way to identify or point to a resource on the web. So in a schema, it could be, for instance, homepage, and the ad ID for that will be, and then we define our own homepage or whatever. That's a pointer. If we use or look at the RRIs in the terms of the context, then you can see here that the part of the schema saying, okay, there's a given name. We are pointing to schema.org/given name. The same for family name. We're pointing to schema.org family name. And then we have an ad ID pointing to markuslandthaler.com. And there we would like to identify the guy called Markus Landthaler, and that's done by the ad type, where we're pointing to the schema, where we're pointing to the schema for persons, and then we can inherit that given name and family name, and we can define that. It's a little bit, or can be a little bit difficult to grasp in the beginning, but let's go and look at some real examples. So in just a second here, I'll just swap my screen here. Stop sharing that. I'm going back there. Antonia and I are still here. So we share the screen again.
I am still here. I'm listening avidly. I'm
just not falling to sleep.
No. Even if I look at it, I'm not. No, that's just my normal look. I just mute because, of course, my little daughter is the other side of the room. Been very good at the moment, but occasionally we get some sort of strange noises coming out of her when she sees something exciting on YouTube. So I thought it was best I muted myself just to be on the safe side. But I'm here.
Okay, good. So I just want to see, everybody can see a screen now where we have a schema tests put up on the website. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is to say, okay, I have installed on this website Mike Martin schema plugin. And that's an easy way to get schema into a page or post. I'll just go through the concepts. So for this particular post, I can go down here, click on the schema, and you will see it comes up with what he calls the schema builder. The schema builder doesn't have any schema, so I can create a new schema and create one from the bottom, or I can go here and say I want to import schema. So if I go in here and take you can go to schema app, we say we import that or scrape that, as it call it. We can see they have two schemas on their web page, a breadcrumb list, and they have organization. I say, okay, I'm going to grab I only want to grab the organization schema, and we can now take a look at the schema. Up here, you can see the context, that's schema.org. The ad ID where we are actually is using this one is our own website or schema app's website. And then we are saying what type of schema that we are going to use in this instance, that's organization. And then they have different type defined. Let me do a thing on preview ahead, and then it's easier to look at. So here you can see the different type definitions, IDs we have in here. We have, for instance, the postal address, and because we have a postal address type is a part of the organization type of schema, they actually maybe should have pointed to the schema.org/organization. But here we have some of the properties down here. And for instance, you can see the address has been defined, area served. And if I go a little bit further down, you can see we have contact points. And in contact points, I want to show you down here. Yeah, you can see down here. Here is the definition of the contact point where you say we are pointing, and URI, where we are pointing to ourselves, and the type is a contact point, and here is a type which is called area served, which is in here, which is a part of the organization schema. And look at this one. The ad ID is pointing to Wikipedia wiki/earth. So what we are trying to tell with this schema is that we are covering the whole globe as our served area. If you are in the US, you could point to a state or a county. So if you're serving a county, that's a way to point to the Google bot that this is the area that we're serving here. The contact point is technical support. We're giving in some properties here when we have a description. And there's an attribute called Disambiguate description to make it clear what we are talking about. They have a lot of more founders, etc., into the schema. And down here, you can see they have the same as. So this could be pointing to social properties for the organization. So if you have Facebook, if you have Twitter, if you have LinkedIn, you put them down there, so you have a way to solidify your brand towards Google bots. So closing this again. So if you want to add to the schema, and you add to the organization schema, then you, in this instance, will go down and add a node or a group node here, so that you add to either the organization schema, or you define a new part of the schema which you want to embed in one old schema. We'll go deeper into that technical aspect of it later. But basically, that's using just one tool, and this is the schema builder from Mike Marty. There's several other out there, but they're not easy to go to. You will find different ones like the Melka schema builder, which is limited a little bit. And you can go out and get plain simple schema. Let me go down to the schema here, settings, because that's something you have to understand with the schema app here. The schema app has over here what we call homepage, campaigns, media, page, and post. Each schema there can be defined as a standard schema, and then you can override it up in the post as I just did here. So if you don't do anything, you will have check marked. You use scraper mode is JSON and microdata requirements and auto collapse. That's what I normally done. And then I've gone in here and said, I use the homepage standards, and I have activated these as well. So basically, that's how you set up your schema. So if you put in pages here, go to that one, and define a schema here, then that schema will be standard for all for the pages schema. And what you have to be aware of, if you're using author and things like that, then you have to go down into settings, to users, and define your user with a proper name and a bio there, because that will be imported into the schema. I'm just checking over here if there's any questions here. What format is that postal address? Well, this format was a Canadian one, but you can define it for US or whatever you like in the let's go back to the post. So go to that schema. So I didn't say that. That's a good one. Maybe we should do that. So I'll go back to this. Just import the schema, and here's the schema, and that's the format that you were talking about. If you need additional, then you go up here add a node, and then you'll go in here and add, for example, address region. That will be your state, and if you want a county, you will have to go in and find. So, yeah, this locality, that's just the town, a city, but I'll just delete this one again, confirm that. But you can build up your own address to suit your local needs. When you're done up here, then you have to save the schema to that page, and then you can either save it to your local one or use it as a global template for all the pages. I'll just cancel this. I will go into schema. Just a second here. So we go to the local schema. And what you should notice is local schema would inherit from the root, with the thing, from organization. So we are down here in local business, and it inherits from thing, place, and local business. What does that mean? That means that you can actually, in local business, if you don't have an attribute, you can use from place. So if I'm going down to local, you can see there's nothing here where it says has map. I'm looking for, it has credentials, has Grover, has Spook, but there's nothing here called has map. But if you go to places and take a look at that, you'll see it has down here the one has map. Because local business inherit the properties of the parent, you can use has map in your local business schema. So you will enter that and put in your map, Google Map URL in there. And by that, you actually point to Google that this website is a local business and the map is there. Does that make sense? I think so. No more comments on that? So basically, when we're using schema, point to schema.org, then we will tell Google or Bing, this web page is about so and so and so. There's one warning though. You might think, okay, I want to fool Google and putting stuff into the schema which is not on the page. That will be ignored. The schema will be ignored, or the property will be ignored. But if you are constantly doing that, you could risk being exposed to schema spam, and you could get your page or site de-indexed. So be careful what you're doing. So with that said, I think that was the basics that we want to touch today, Tony.
Yes, that covers it quite well. Yeah, that's really good. I followed that, and it all made perfect sense to me anyway. But so hopefully it has to everybody else as well. It is definitely worthy of noting. I'm glad you made the point at the end as well about about just going off and scraping schema from everywhere and just dumping the whole lot on your page and to hell with it. It might be good, but it's always best to. They do clearly state that you shouldn't make false declarations, so it's always best just to cut out the bits that you haven't got, or if you really want to include that bit of schema about video, then go down and include the video. Because it looks a bit odd if you're declaring 5 videos on your page and you haven't got one. So I hope you can't hear that because she's rattling Meccano now. So anyway, that's great. We've got to the like you said earlier on. I think you mentioned a follow-on. So I don't know whether that's next week or the week after. Is it? Have you got anything to say about that? When was this next week? The follow-on where you're digging deeper, or are we going to have a break for another week?
That would be a surprise.
Okay, it would be a surprise to me as well. Then that's good. Then, but any questions?
Unfortunately, I'm tied up very much at the moment, so it might be in 14 days or 2 weeks. I don't know yet.
And really, I mean, the reason we haven't been around so much lately is we've actually sort of both got off and got busy and got lives and things like that. We've just been incredibly busy at the tail end of last year in various different avenues, whether related to SEO or not. And it's been 2019 was an incredible year, really. It started off a bit slow. I never like years with an odd number, which is a bit unfortunate because every other year has got one. But all the same, it turned into an incredible year. I do hope that 2020 turns out the same, and I hope that for everybody that listens, it turns into an incredibly good year. The only thing to think about now is that I do remember when we started the show, it was a year ago. It was almost a year ago, probably about the 7th of January or something like that, going back.
19th, I think.
Was it really? Right. So, okay. So we're almost coming up to our first anniversary. And I remember opening that with saying that has everybody got their objectives set for the year? Is everybody getting on with them? Because the year will soon be over. And lo and behold, it was soon over. And here we are in another year already. So you don't sit back. Take the learning, take your knowledge, implement like crazy, then really go for it in the year, because the year will soon be over. And, there we go. That's all I can say. Just everything comes to those who work for it, I think is the moral of the story. So, is there any questions finally lurking there that need answering?
I just had to go through them once again.
Of course, if anybody does have any questions, they can join us in the CommonSenSEO Skype group. They can put messages. You can put messages down here in the chat. We do monitor them after the event. It might take us a day or two to get back to you in the YouTube chat. If it's Facebook, we'll probably find it quicker. But there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us if you do have questions or thoughts afterwards that you suddenly come to you and you want some clarification on those matters.
I think it's Richard who says, some of your schema I have not seen in any examples I've been able to scrape. So I'm assuming that many people / entities are using schema incorrectly. Yes and no. The problem is that if you scrape blindly what everybody else has put in and don't understand schema per se, then you can scrape their bad habits as well. And if you're scraping schema, my personal view on that is there's no need to scrape 100 pages of schema, because if you are competing for a niche and a term, then you only have to be better than the first 10. And if 9 of those don't have schema, just putting schema on in a simplified form will give you ahead of the competition. But if you really do a proper schema, then you're much better than competition.
It can be quite, well, it is quite time consuming to do it properly, as is everything. That's why we all look for shortcuts. If if you're working on one site, then it's worth it. If all your revenue depends on one site being absolutely optimized to the max, then yeah, it's worth that extra time, or worth having a VA just focusing purely on schema. But yeah, the truth is most of us are working on many different projects, and we need to be a bit quick and dirty about it all, really, don't we? So, it really depends on yourself how much you want to dedicate to getting something absolutely perfect. Sometimes the old saying, good enough is good enough. So just do what you need to do and move on. A bit like me scraping an article in Spanish or something like that because I want to put something up in Spain, and of course to me it looks like perfect Spanish language, and to any Spaniard they'd have hysterics reading it, no doubt. Or so yeah, you've got to understand what it's all about. It helps to understand, and if you really feel that the site is worth that extra care and attention, then learn these things and take that time to get it right, I think is the
I will say for your branded and money side, you would go an extra mile to get the thing right. For outdoor rinks, you could use these automating schema generators that put some schema on, and hopefully you're better than the rest because you have put schema on and they haven't. So that's just my personal opinion on that one. So I know many of you are pumping out size in the thousands. What do you do to get around that? Fine. If you're using scraped schema, if you're using a plugin that auto-generate, that's maybe fine. If it works, it works. The last one here is Richard again, still confused on how to address the ID. The address ID is created. We'll go into that, Richard. So no more questions.
Yeah, we definitely will cover that @ID deeper on the next one as well, because it is something that keeps coming back up again quite frequently. It's a question that I do see popping up all the time, so it definitely does warrants a little bit more attention. So when we come back next time, Henrik will have a nice neat presentation prepared on @IDs, I guess. I hope. There we go. No, that's the homework. There we go. All right, well, look, so that's a wrap then, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, and first end of the first show for 2020. Thank you very much for joining. We both totally appreciate your company and your following, and also if you haven't already subscribed, then do go up there and do that. Any questions, leave them in the comments, and thank you from myself over to Henrik for his final words. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having attended. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comment section and we'll try to answer them. But as I said, we will definitely go into the topic of the address in more detail next time. Okay, take care. Ciao.